It has been brought to our attention that depending on the platform that you listen to, you can no longer hear some of our previous episodes.
Some of our favorite episodes.
Some of the ones where people would reach out and say, hey, listen, I can't believe that you talked to insert whatever name here.
And honestly, it makes us a little sad that you can't go back in time and have a listen because the stories were really incredible.
We reference a lot of times, oh, we had a chance to talk with so-and-so in the past. And if you can't go back, then it's kind of just, oh. So we wanted to bring some of those guests, some of those former guests back into the spotlight.
We're going to call it like a rerun, I think.
A Why Me Project rerun.
Do you remember those?
I do. Back in the day, or you used to throw the tape into the VCR and, oh, we're dating ourselves.
We are, but a rerun was the opportunity to rewatch one of your favorite episodes. Now everything's so accessible. Well, we thought it was.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado,
here's your Why Me Project rerun.
Kechi Okwuchi, how are you?
I am great. Thank you guys so much for having me on your podcast. And congratulations to y'all. 5 years in the business. That's awesome.
Thank you so much. It's been a fun journey. The podcast for us was a nice extension of what we did on our morning show. Because morning shows, you know how it is in the biz. Like, 2 minutes. And then be quiet. Whereas this, we really get to dive into stories, and it's so, I don't know. I love hearing more about the whys, the hows, and those sorts of things. So 5 years.
No pressure on any of this, by the way, today. And I mean, really, you're the only one with the answers, so you could lie to us. But the first one is our most important, and that is, who are you and where did you come from?
My name is Kechi Okwuchi, and I am 32 years old. I'm Nigerian, so I come from Nigeria originally. I was born there. I lived there until I was 16 years old and moved to America when I was 17. So I've been here since about 2007, and here being Houston, Texas, essentially. And so I've been here ever since, built a life here with my family, and I guess I've gotten the chance to wear many hats since I got here. I am now a speaker, I'm a singer, I'm an author, I'm a burn survivor advocate, and an advocate for many other causes that speak to me.
Well, we're going to dive into all of this and so much more, but I'm curious, what was life like growing up in Nigeria for you and your family?
Life was very fun. I had a fun childhood. My memories are filled with mostly positives, thank God. And I was an only child for a while. I mean, about 11 years before my sister was born. And then we became this family of 4 that was just really small and cute and sweet. And, being an only child was fun too, because I had all my parents' attention, and, we didn't have a lot, but they never made me feel like I was like lacking anything. I guess having one kid that was pretty easily satisfied by, I guess, books and just music. It wasn't really hard to keep me entertained, but they were both very loving and really believed in the value of family, having family around you. So I grew up very close to my cousins, my extended family, my aunts, my uncles, and really kind of grew up in that kind of familial environment. So, having that early on was definitely something that fed into my life, moving forward, especially with what was to come, essentially.
We always have these dreams, these goals, these aspirations, and what you thought of maybe where you were going to be to where you are now is perhaps very different, obviously. But what did you think, or where did you think that moving to the States was going to be a thing? Did you think that you were ever going to have this career of singing and writing and everything else?
Not at all. Not even close. Nothing that's happening now was ever something that I thought would happen, that I planned to happen. Definitely things that I would have been happy if they happened. They were dreams because these were things that were tied to my hobbies at the time as a kid, things that I loved to do, but they were extracurricular. They weren't like passion. They weren't things that I was like aiming for as career goals. So being able to do those things now is definitely an interesting turn of events, and just another way how God just kind of surprises you and puts you where you're supposed to be, but I digress. Essentially, no, I did not think anything I'm doing right now would have been, what I would be doing. Like at 16, I had my heart set on like economics. That was like something that I felt like, was conventional, and also interesting to me, where no one would complain if that's what I wanted to pursue. At the same time, it wasn't like, anything science that just like completely turns me off, it was just something in the middle that would be a reasonable place to, have a career, working in the UN or for like a chamber of commerce or, things like that. That was really where I was at that age. So yeah, all this is very surprising.
Yeah, no kidding. So you're going to move to the US. What was that? I mean, I can only imagine it's so far away now from the roots that you had and your family and your aunts and uncles. Mm-hmm. I imagine there might have been some hesitancy to move.
The circumstances were very special. So it wasn't really a choice, it was more born from the situation at the time. After the accident happened, there really wasn't any option about where to go for reconstructive surgery. So it was something that had to happen and happened, it wasn't an independent move. I moved with my entire family. So myself and my immediate family, but that's what I mean by that. So my mom, my sister, my dad. So I wasn't going to be moving by myself, and I wasn't going to be moving just, for, I guess, the heck of it. It was really, the goal was reconstructive surgery. And then from there, it kind of just became, you need to be here to continue getting treatment. And then it naturally just became this kind of adapting to this new environment long term. And then before we knew it, we were, we were building our lives here, and we've been here ever since.
So we're talking reconstructive surgery. Let's go back before we go forward. What led up to this then taking place?
Born and raised in Nigeria, right? Went to high school there. Obviously, I went to a boarding high school. And that's pretty much where I spent the next 6 years of my life, from 11 to 16. That's the environment that I was in. And at 16 years old, I was a high school senior. I was in my final year and getting ready for the SATs. My goal was to study in London. I was hoping I would get into a college in London. So that was like at the forefront of my mind, anyone's mind really as a senior. That's all you're thinking about is the SATs and just, graduating properly. Mm-hmm. So, and of course, prom, very important.
Yes.
And, and so these were the things that were in my mind. I remember this was the first semester, fall semester 2005. And, so we're preparing. We had seen some schools during the semester, had an excursion, went to some college fairs, things like that. And, the semester ended. And it was December 10th, 2005. It was a Saturday. So we're heading home for Christmas. And it was going to be a very short trip. Usually Christmas is about 3 weeks. So we would be back on campus like early January. So it really wasn't a long holiday, but one that we looked forward to regardless, because, it's anything to get out of the school campus. So we basically got ready. And when I say we, I mean 61 students from my high school. So usually those that live in the same area would travel the same route. It's a boarding school that kind of has a lot of people from different parts of the country. So when we're going home, we go home to different locations. Mm-hmm. Myself, I lived about an hour and a half by flight from my boarding school, as well as 60 other students from my school. So we would travel together. So this was typical. We fly all the time. It wasn't weird that we were, going to be flying that day. This was just routine. So 61 of us got to the airport. Flight was delayed briefly. Eventually, the plane got here. It was a commercial plane, regular jet. We boarded with other passengers. There were 109 in total. So 61 students plus 109 other passengers, including the flight crew. And then we got in the air and the journey started. Everything was fine. It was an hour and a half. This is a route we've done a million times, so it was uneventful, as flights usually should be. Everything was fine for most of the flight. And then the pilot starts the descent into the airport, right? And it's about 15 minutes left in the flight. And then the turbulence starts. Again, routine. Turbulence is not a weird thing. It happens with flights. It's normal. No. Then, this one just started to get really exaggerated, get really intense, and persistent. It just kept going and getting worse. And I remember in the cabin, everyone was just kind of very quiet. I mean, flights are usually quiet, but this time it was kind of like this tension, no one wanted to say anything because we were all thinking the same thing. But at the same time, it's why are you even thinking that? The chances of that happening are 1 in a million. They rarely ever happen. It's just unlikely. So even in that moment, no one wanted to think the worst, And then the worst was happening. This woman at the back of the plane kind of screamed, and then it just incited chaos. Everyone was screaming God's name, Jesus, blood of Jesus, like just shouting, and no running around, just yelling, because like you don't run around, you're strapped into your seatbelt. So I just remember sitting there in my seat. I was in an aisle seat in the front of the plane, and next to me was one of my closest friends. She was in the aisle seat next to mine. And I remember just sitting there like, what is happening? Like, it was surreal. It was like a movie. Like it was like the kind of thing that only happens in movies. So it was really hard for me to like believe that this was reality, because it was just, wow, am I actually inside a plane that's like having issues? Like, is this real? And, I couldn't get past that thought process. And I remember looking at my friend, and we held each other's hands, and she's the last person that I saw, the last person that I spoke to before the darkness just came over me. And it was like holding her hand, and then hearing this scraping metal sound in my brain. And then I must have blacked out at that point, so I don't remember the actual impact of the crash, or maybe the blacking out was the impact. I don't know. But my next vivid memory after that is opening my eyes. I was lying in a hospital bed in South Africa, and 5 weeks had passed, and I was waking up from a coma.
Wow.
And that's essentially that's the beginning of a whole new kind of life. That was the beginning of my journey as a burn survivor. All my plans, everything that we had planned, everything that was going on, none of it mattered anymore. And this was now our new reality.
You were in the hospital for how long?
This was South Africa. I was in the hospital for 7 months, 4 months in the burn ICU, and then 3 in the ward.
When did you realize that it was as bad as it was?
That's a great question. Because for a while after I woke up, I really thought that I would like be up on my feet and going back to school by May. This was accident happened in December 10th, coma for 5 weeks. I woke up in January 2006, and prom was in, I think, June. And then graduation was May, and then graduation was June, something like that, in that area, that time frame. And I really thought, like, in the beginning that, like, I would get better and join my schoolmates and be back on campus for like prom and for graduation. Like, there's no way I'm going to miss those things. There's no way things are that bad, But it was interesting because the better I got, the more I realized how bad things were. At first it was just waking up and being just this numbness, not really quite being there, At first, when I first got to the hospital, I was given like a 30% chance of survival by my surgeon, the first surgeon that saw me when I came into the hospital. And he had seen me, and then he had to go on his like leave right after. So he didn't expect to see me alive after he came back, like didn't have any expectations at all. Of course, this is stuff my mom told me after the fact. Mm-hmm. But like, so when he came back, and saw me, he was like surprised, of course, in a good way, but like, that was how bad things were. But I didn't know that while I was in that exact state, at that time, it was just very floaty, very dreamy. I was just going in and out of weird dreams and visions and just things that I guess happen when you're like standing on the brink, really. But as my life became more certain and my foothold on like, this side became more sure, I was obviously not going to die. I was going to be alive, and I was going to be fine medically, and my body, my wounds were healing, and I got to see more and more of my flesh like exposed. So like as I healed, they took off bandages, and I saw like the damage more and more. And the more I saw, the more I realized not only am I not going to make prom or graduation, but I'm probably going to be in the hospital for a very, very long time, like years. And I remember like, that was a phase of my treatment that was the hardest to deal with, because reality was setting in. It wasn't just about like the injuries anymore, but about my life and like what quality of life I would have looking forward, like the future. And then also, how long was I going to be like a patient? How long will I be away from outside of like removed from society and out and removed from like the regular, like just regular life? So that was a very difficult, psychologically difficult time for sure, after getting over the physical parts. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. I know with injuries, they say most of it is psychological. And I can't even imagine the trauma that you were trying to process during that time. For someone who is going through trauma and trying to process reality versus the grief of all levels of people that you knew, of the dreams, what are some of the things that help navigate that situation for you in a healthy way?
I think for me, the most important thing was my mom at first, my family. So support system, talking about the family that I grew up with. I mean, all that came into play during this time in my life in the most crucial way. I feel like, I take it for granted a lot, the fact that I had that kind of support. But I learned over time, especially after I moved to America, that not a lot of people can say the same as burn survivors, that they had access to that kind of support system. And it breaks my heart because I don't know who I would be today without that support system. My mom, first and foremost, not only was she like my rock in the hardest time, but she was my reason, quite literally, for opening my eyes every morning, just knowing that I would see her the next day, and I needed something to hold on to in that beginning time when things were shaky and it wasn't certain that I would survive. That was like an important, it's interesting how the doctors talk about how there's a point where, and this point is where they have nothing to do with it. They can't do anything about it, but there's a point where the patient decides that they are going to survive this. And that's like a thing that doesn't have anything to do with the medicine or the treatment. They can treat all they want, but at some point the patient decides, I'm going to actually play my own role in my survival, in helping things along. And my mom was a big part of my reason, to actually make that decision to survive. So having her at the start, like from the beginning, was so key for me. And then as time passed, eventually kind of morphed into me wanting to stay alive because I wanted to prove, I guess it was interesting. I kind of wanted to see how far I could go. It became a kind of test of like my willpower, I suppose. Like if I've made it to this day, maybe I can make it to tomorrow. Okay, let me see if I can make it to the next day. What about the next day? It was literally an everyday choice, like every single day. There was no looking forward like too much in the future because who knows if that's going to happen. And the past, really didn't matter anymore. So that was also a big thing too, like me getting to the point where my will was like, my willpower. I want to see the next day and see the next day, but then in the beginning it was my mom, and then eventually it became my entire family. So having that support of people who didn't care about anything except me getting better was definitely a huge thing that helped with dealing with that traumatic time, because I didn't have anyone who cared about how I looked or anyone who cared about, anything, me missing school or just reminding me constantly about life or whatever. It was just about in this moment, here and now, we just want you to be okay. Take each day at a time. There's no rushing. There's no need to even think about anything else. You are fine. And we are here for you. And having that just simple 100%, reliable support was extremely vital to my healing, to the trauma. And then also, especially with the I guess the psychological effects of just understanding that I was one of two survivors, which came much later, the fact that no one else from my school survived, these are things that they couldn't tell me until they were sure I could handle the weight of the truth. This happened about 4 months in. And just, if I didn't have my family at that time, I just don't know how I would have processed all that, and the kind of person I would be today, because they were there to feed love and life into me in a way that I cannot possibly explain, especially when it comes to faith. That was a struggle for me as well, especially in that time. I was a brand new Christian, and then I learned all these things about how all these people were gone. So that definitely caused just like a rift in my understanding of who God was and what he could do and what he could do and what he could mean to us. So having my family around to navigate that for me as well was very important. So I have to say, everything just comes down to that support system for me. And I'd be a different Kechi without that, for sure.
You talk about healing and trauma. You're a burn survivor advocate. You have a book, More Than My Scars. You kind of had two choices, and it's either bury it inside or talk about it? Why did you decide to then talk about this rather than go the other way and say, listen, this, I don't want to talk about, because you're now having to relive all the things that you went through each and every day that you talk about this stuff.
That's very true. And it's interesting you say that because there were two survivors, right? The second lady that survived, I didn't know her prior to the accidents, but her experience is, on the same plane, vastly different from mine. Where I passed out, she didn't. She remembers everything. She remembers everything plus impact everything. Where I sustained third-degree burns over 65% of my body, she didn't get any burns. She, even though we're both like in the front part of the plane, which was interesting. She didn't have any burns, but she broke like I think her bone, like her arm. And the differences in our situation, even though we were in the same plane, were not just physical, but the way that we handled what happened to us mentally is also vastly different, because she just became a recluse. She just didn't want to ever talk about it, think about it. She just retreated into her life, wanted to just forget everything, any of this happened, just wanted to just not be bothered by the world, had no interest in talking about anything. And I believe that it doesn't really have it has more to do with the fact that we both remember different parts of the accidents, from each other. I think if I had the experience that she had, where she remembers everything, I cannot tell you for sure if I would be so easily led to talk about what happened that day and the events that happened after, because I feel like that plays a very important role in how much you're willing to share. Because I just feel like her trauma is so much deeper psychologically, and that's what leads her not to want to talk about it, because she remembers everything. And so literally takes her down that path, but I passed out at some point. I don't remember the impacts. And I think that helps me rationally. It helps because I remember the before, I remember the fear and everything. I remember the plane malfunctioning and falling towards the ground, but I don't remember it hitting the ground, and I think that actually is the reason why I'm able to talk about it more, because even though I remember the scary stuff, I don't remember the actual accidents, and I don't remember the fire everywhere, the explosion. I don't remember just things that she talked about and told me about that just sound horrific and make me confused, how either of us even survived something this horrible. So I really think that the reason I'm able to talk about it more is just because that's the part of the part of the experience that I have is one that gave me more physical trauma than mental. And so going down that path is definitely traumatic, but not as bad as it could have been, to the point where I would just keep quiet about it totally, So that's what I believe anyway, because she just the only person she talked to about that day is me. She doesn't have any interest in and because we became friends after, because we survived this crazy situation. So naturally we, wanted to bond over that, and we did. And so that's the only time I've never seen anything in the papers, nothing ever online. She just doesn't want to say anything to anyone, So she's only interested in associating with me. And, if I ask her to do something or ask her for something or anything, then she's willing to do that for me. But, I rarely do, because I don't want to put her through anything that would cause, some kind of regression, like a trauma, or trigger her in some way. So it's just really interesting. I feel like we both got two different versions of trauma of the same event, and I think that plays a big role in why I'm able to kind of go down this path over and over. My experience is definitely my memory is not as traumatic as hers, but you can see my trauma more than, it's inside me. So
you talked about how you were a new Christian when this all happened. And I know some people say, well, if you're a new Christian, maybe you don't have the strong enough roots to be able to weather those kind of storms. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, first of all, how did you become a Christian? And then what were some of the things about your faith that really helped carry you through?
So how did I become a new Christian? I guess technically I wasn't new at the time the accident happened. I was a Christian by virtue of my family being Christians. That's what we believed. I believed what my parents believed. I believed what my family believed. I went to church because they went, and fellowship because they fellowshiped. So I knew of God. I believed in him, and I believed that he existed. Did I have anything personal with him? No. Did I have any interest in having a personal relationship with him? No. I just was okay with just believing because my family believed, and just this is the family belief system. That's it,
Yeah.
So that was the extent of my relationship with God at the time the accident happened. To me, he was just this guy in the sky that would kind of like a sterner version of my actual dad, that would be there to make sure I don't have a foot out of line and punish me if I do, and praise me if I don't. So he was the author, I guess, of my moral compass, growing up, and that was pretty much it. After the accident happened, it kind of changed because of my circumstances. I got to a place where, quite frankly, medication was just not enough. All the surgery in the world and all the meds, they obviously they helped physically, but nothing was really reaching me inside. And I felt like my healing was not complete. I felt like there was an element of it that was missing, and it was the part of the healing process that was not like, I was not having access to like a comfort or a peace inside that would actually make me believe that everything was going to be okay. My parents kept talking about it. My mom she was the main representation of faith to me during that time, still is. But like, to me, what she had with God was something extremely special. And she just had this complete assurance that it was all going to be fine. And I just didn't understand. I wanted to feel that way. I wanted to know how she felt that way and access that. And everyone was telling me, you got to know God if you want that. So I was like, well, okay, so let's, my mom, at first, in the beginning, when I was in the coma, I remember, one thing I remember from the coma, definitely my mom's voice as she's telling me what happened, I was going to be okay. And then she would sing to me often. And then she would also read scripture to me. So I remember waking up and just, as time continued, there are things she continued to do for me. In the beginning, about a month or two in, I couldn't talk because I had this trachea tube in my throat. So her voice was like, I just wanted her to keep talking and that's what I hung on to, So she would sing, she would pray, she would read the Bible, she would just talk about any and everything. And the moments when she's like reading the Bible to me were very peaceful. It was less about really absorbing the words and just, I don't know, something about the words were just very comforting, life-giving. It was, of course, I didn't know it was life-giving, that it just felt comforting for me in the spirit. I didn't really understand, but I enjoyed, it was a nice feeling. It was like almost like a lullaby, really. And I remember as I got better, it just became harder and harder to access that feeling. And so I wanted more of it, so I started to ask my mom questions about God, and she was all too eager to answer them. I could feel like she being excited for me that I was interested in finding out about him for myself, but not wanting to like push me or like dictate how this went. So I could feel that energy from her. And I just started learning about him organically, I suppose. I was curious, about her faith and her God, and I wanted to know more about him. And everyone was telling me that he was the person that would give me this peace I was looking for. So, I had no other options. So I was like, I might as well try this. I was also learning how to pray, like, actually just talk to God. My grandma was the one who told me, I need to stop thinking about him as this like big punisher in the sky. He's your dad. You can just talk to him, cry out to him when things are feeling frustrating. And that happened often. And so it was, around this time, this budding faith and this, I guess, seeking out of him, for myself, for the first time ever, that I learned that, everyone in the accident died. This was 4 months in, and all my friends that I thought were like in school, like I thought I just got the worst of it. I thought I was the only one in the hospital that was like this badly wounded, and that everyone else was okay and they were all in school. Like, because if one person survives, like it doesn't make it, of course, no one, if you survive a plane crash, that means it wasn't that bad. So everyone is alive. It made logical sense to me. So finding out the truth was earth shattering, because not just about like the fact that they were all gone, but like, how can God let this happen? This is crazy. I thought y'all said he was a good God. Like, how can he allow 60 children, aside from everyone else that died, like to die all at once, like in this horrible situation. So that threw like a spoke in the wheels of my understanding of God and in my faith, my search. And I remember it was just days and days of depression, crying, confusion. And my mom, my grandma, my dad, everyone around me would try to just, just kind of comfort me as much as they could. And it was really my mom that kind of said something one day that struck me. And she was just like, and I talk about this in the book because this was a very major turning point for me. She said, honestly, sometimes we don't know why bad things happen. Like, we live in this world and bad things they happen to good and bad people. It just happens, and, that was, for me, that was like my realization that, being a Christian isn't going to exempt you from life happening to you, Mm-hmm. And for me, that was profound because like, okay, so then what is the point of this? Like, what makes it special? Why do people talk about this like it's something special to be a part of, to be a Christian, to walk this path? And so she just said, it doesn't exempt you from life happening to you. Yes. But it gives you a place to go to when life does happen. It tells you that everything's going to be okay. It gives you a place of refuge. That is who God is for us. He is that place to go to. He is that source of comfort that no one else can give you when the worst things happen to you and you survive them. That is the place that you run to, because no one on earth can comfort. There's some traumas and some grief that no one can comfort except God, like the grief of losing a child, like the grief of losing, just usually has to do with like the worst of it is losing people to death. And I feel like that was the moment that like just changed my entire point of view, my entire perspective. So he doesn't make bad things happen. That was so important for me to understand. Wow. He didn't make this accident happen. He didn't cause this. This is just what happens sometimes in life. Bad things happen. But when they do happen, even if you can't control when life happens, what you do have control over is like how you react to life, So Kechi, you can decide, for me, I was like, I can decide to like turn away from him in anger because of what happened and lose access to that peace that I had been getting from learning about him. Or I could see him as my great comforter and that place I can run to when these bad things happen and when I feel horrible and I feel like I need a refresher. I need him to comfort me and tell me everything's going to be okay. And so for me, that became what I latched onto. I just latched onto that. It made so much sense to me. And, it solved the mystery of this being, how can he allow bad things happen? And then at the same time also be the person that like the source of like this peace, those two things couldn't go together. And so it solved that mystery for me. And then it just started to make sense because when I thought about all my friends that were gone, and then I thought about their parents, their loved ones, one thing that struck me and that helped me find purpose in all this was I didn't want this life that was saved to be saved for nothing. I wanted the parents and the loved ones that those kids left behind to see that I appreciated this life, the second chance I was given, and that I appreciated their prayers because they saw my life as this one hope out of this dark thing that happened that shook the entire country. But Kechi survived, one person survived. We're out of all these kids, this person survived. We're going to hold on to that. We're going to hope that she gets better. I couldn't let those feelings and those prayers go to waste. And, if I had decided to stay in that depressive state where like, why me? Why, how, like, because my question was not even about like, because I didn't wish I died in their place or that I didn't feel like I didn't deserve to live. It was more like, if I'm alive, then you're God. Everyone else could be alive. Like, why didn't you save everyone? That was my confusion because you are great enough to do that. I didn't get that. But I realized, like, as I was learning more and more about him, like, I wanted him to allow me to live a life that showed those that lost loved ones that day that I believed that I could live with a purpose for them. So it was about tying my life and my purpose to those that passed away that didn't have the second chance that I have. I wanted to live for them. I wanted to do things that would make them proud of me, make their loved ones proud of me. And I think that was another thing that really helped me hold on, because my life stopped being just mine. It was a pressure I put on myself. No one asked me to do that. No one made me feel this way ever. I just felt it was the least I could do, So I think navigating, how I was going to turn what happened into a strength, something that would help me move forward rather than cripple me. That was something that was born out of my new understanding of who God was. And I knew that it was something I couldn't do without him. So, I kind of had to hold on to him. So I think that was it. That was really, hopefully that makes sense. This is a combination of all the things brought me to that place of understanding of how my relationship with God was kind of born from that kind of situation. And since then, it's just been this journey, still learning about him and getting more used to, as time passes, praying more often, knowing of him in the Bible, and, just kind of making sure he's a part of every step of my life. That way I can stick to what I said about living for the angels, which is what they started to call the kids that passed away, the 60 angels. If I want to live for them and I want to do things that would make them proud, then I want to continuously, just walk this path, doing things that I hope God wants me to do. So, yeah.
I had mentioned it before. You had also mentioned it as well. More Than My Scars. Why then did you want to write this book?
This book for me, it was number one, cathartic. After everything happened in South Africa, I had no interest in revisiting that part of my life ever again. It's interesting because I'm not really someone that I would consider bury everything, don't ever talk about it again. That's not really me. I don't mind, as you can see, talking about these things, certain things anyway about it. It's the faith part of it, the trauma part of it. Those are easier for me to talk about because they're almost kind of they're more about what was going on in my head than what was happening to me physically. To write this book and to tell the story would mean going back to the physical, like the gritty difficulty of having third-degree burns and going through that process of dealing with this new body and everything. And revisiting those memories, which were the most painful memories of my life, were something that definitely was like not going to happen. It was a box. It was dusty. It was in my mind. It was there and it was there forever. I was never going to touch it ever. I had gone through it once in South Africa. I was not going to go back and go through it again in my head, ever again. So as time passed after I moved to America, that was just a part of my life that I was just never going to think about. And I didn't realize that was literally me. That's actually a traumatic response to trauma. Like for me, I thought I was okay. Because I recovered from this physically, and I was, for the most part, I was me. My personality didn't change. Things about me that were not physical were still the same. And I had learned during my time in South Africa to treat my scars as part of me, but not everything about me. So, I felt like I was in a pretty good place. Like my scars don't define me. This was like my mantra. So I believe that was fine, but I didn't realize that not even wanting to talk about all that stuff, not having this 7-month vacuum in my mind of what South Africa represents and putting it somewhere in the past and never wanting to talk about it. That's like, you're not over that, obviously. And so I wanted to tell my story because I wanted to show people how relatable it is to go through trauma and how it's basically the fact that overcoming trauma is, I talk about it a lot, but from a place of like the other side. And it might seem easier for me to talk about, you can do this, you can do that, overcome this. But like, for me to get to this point, a lot happened. There was a long process. And so I wanted to share that so people that I'm always talking to about, overcoming trauma can see how long it took for me to get there and relate to that. I wanted to be my story to be relatable to these people. I didn't want, because I know that, a plane crash is not, it's not like something that everyone, like, it's not a regular experience, but, it doesn't have to be as big as a plane crash to be a valid trauma. And scars don't have to be as visible as mine to be valid either. Invisible scars are as real as visible scars. And so I wanted to connect with my audience in a better way and show them, like, my story of overcoming trauma is not as different as you think it might be from yours. But to do that, I had to delve into those memories in that box. And so that's why it took me so long to write the book, because I realized every time I started, I would realize, dang it, I have to talk about South Africa.
Yeah.
And that was like a huge hurdle for me. I started writing this book in 2018 and finished it strictly because of the pandemic. Like, literally, I finished this book last year. Took me, I guess, 5 years roughly. Yeah, about 4 years or so. But like, most of it was written in 2020, especially the South Africa section, because I had downtime. I wasn't traveling as much anymore. No distractions, no excuses. So basically, I had nothing but me and my memories. And it took the entire like half of from like May down to December of 2020 was me trying to get through South Africa. And, but I realized it was cathartic. It was something that I think needed to happen. And that's a part of, I can't tell my story without telling it. That's majorly where most things happen for me. That's where most mind shifts happen. Most perspective changes happen in that time of my life. So there was just no avoiding it. So, I think after getting through that, I realized that I had something here, and it was something I wanted to share with the world, for whatever good it would do. I just want people to feel not alone in their trauma and in what it takes to overcome it.
Well, I'm glad that you did.
Thank you.
Because there are so many parallels just with the process that you've had to go through, the journey you've had to take. And I love that you say, scars come in different shapes and sizes. It's people like to compare in this day and age, and they do the whole, well, I didn't have to go through that, so I should really, suck it up and carry on. But trauma is trauma.
Exactly. That's it. Exactly. Yeah. That's something I definitely deal with a lot. What you went through, that's just, and I'm like, and I get that, to an extent, I do get that, because people are like, they wonder, had they been in that situation, would they handle it the way I did? Most likely not. We're all different people. But like, it's not a matter of, if you were in this situation or not. This is my cross, I suppose. Like, this is my version of trauma, or my cross to bear. But we all have ours, and one is not bigger or worse or better than the other. They just are what they are. And to you, your experience that crippled you, it doesn't have to be plane crash. It can be anything. As long as it's something that hindered you in some way, that's what makes it trauma. Something that's keeping you from accomplishing what you've always wanted to accomplish, or it's holding you back in different ways that other people may not even be able to understand. I like telling people that, like, none of us can take on each other's trauma. We're built in our own specific way to handle what life throws at us. So it's not like, because I've dealt with this, that means I can deal with every other level of trauma down the line because I'm at this level of trauma. That's not how it works. I know people who have gone through things that I would go through another plane crash before I go through that. And that's facts. So like, it really is not about it's not a comparing game. It's not the way it is. It's about, just being able to handle what life throws at you specifically, and understanding that this is your own specific trauma and cross to bear, your own hurdles to overcome, and no one else's, so give it the same value you would give any other person's trauma. It's, because when you invalidate your trauma, you compare, you basically you're underestimating, what it is that you have had to go through, because you're comparing it to someone else's and you're thinking, I need to just suck it up. That doesn't help anyone, least of all you. So whenever I give speeches and talk to people, I try to really, especially kids, especially teenagers, I try to just let them know that that's not how it works. You don't compare, what you're going through is just as valid, and you need to give it that importance, that same importance, because that's the only way you're going to be able to overcome it, really.
The book is available now, More Than My Scars. Kechi on all the socials, KECHI, and KechiOfficial.com. We appreciate you taking some time and sharing your heart today.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you for tuning in to an old episode, a past guest of our Why Me Project rerun.
Something that we're starting now because there are so many episodes that we really did love, and they've kind of disappeared from the digital world.
And speaking of digital world, I did a little recon. There are at least 9 different platforms in which you can listen to the Why Me Project podcast.
Okay.
So there's no excuses, but I mean, some of the main ones like Apple Podcast and or Spotify.
And you could always head to our social media accounts to stay up to date, as each and every Wednesday we have a brand new episode for Why Me Project. And you can also let us know if there's someone that you would like to hear on a future episode.
At Why Me Project on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Why Me Project at Outlook.com.